Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Zenitsu, and you're listening to the Digi Talks podcast, the show that covers various topics from news to meta developments and everything in between for the fine folks who love the Digimon trading card game. Just as a quick reminder, I do stream this live over at twitch.tv/Zenitsu, and it's also uploaded as a YouTube channel on the YouTube channel of Zenitsu, as well as being up on various podcasting platforms like Spotify for your viewing and listening pleasure. Feel free to leave a rating, follow, like, subscribe, or review, depending on the platform of choice that you're listening on, to make sure you're always up to date. Today, I'm actually with a special guest host, Tyler from Gaia Force Gaming, and we are going to be talking about Digimon's up-and-coming Nationals tournament, and what we're expecting to see, and, well, how we're going to prepare for it. So, Tyler, feel free to introduce yourself for all of the listeners.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Tyler from Gaia Force Gaming. If you don't have any background on me, I am the founder and I guess face of Gaia Force Gaming, which is a Digimon team that spans several states throughout the United States and North America. And yeah, we're all lovers of the franchise, lovers of the game. You could find me over at youtube.com/Gaia Force Gaming for most of my content. I do also stream tournament runs at GFG Tyler on Twitch, and yeah, on Twitter, I think it's also Gaia Force Gaming. Pretty much everywhere, it's Gaia Force Gaming or GFG Tyler. So, yeah, I mean, I play the Digimon card game in North America. I'm a serial third place finisher for major events. I think I might have the most third place finishes in North America. Always outside of the bubble of the best prizes, but that's okay. And yeah, I don't think I'm known for any specific deck, but I am known for being a lover of the game.
Yeah, you're definitely a way more consistent player than I am. Like, I'll top every now and then. I could get to nationals with invites. Um, but I'm nowhere near as consistent as you and some of your team. So it's always nice to have the highest echelon of player that join this type of a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I yes and no. Like it's a numbers game. If you play like when I was playing every single event and practicing every single day, I was definitely doing a lot better overall in performance wise. Now, I mean, nowadays if I like X2, I'll drop. I'll go do something else, which isn't really how you become conducive to being better overall, but you know, things have gotten busier for me since things cleared up. The pandemic's a little less strict. That was when I was really grinding. It was during the pandemic when there was nothing else really to do.
Yeah, that's fair. Life definitely is a giant factor into what we're able to produce. So I'm just happy that you're on this episode because nationals. So the question, Teddy isn't able to join us, unfortunately. He, as people might already know, is not going to nationals. Not that I'm excluding him from this conversation, but normally we do a question of the week, and to the audience, the question of the week is, what do you expect to see top nationals? Not exactly win, it could be win, but just top nationals. So I personally think that we are going to see Anubis top. I think people are going to jump on that deck, even though it is going to get limited come like 2 weeks after BT15's release. That's still a solid like month and a half, 2 months to be able to play it, and that deck is absolutely absurd. What do you think is going to be able to top?
Yeah, I think Anubis is definitely probably the thing that pops to the head quicker, like the quickest. Just because a lot of the limits do hit Anubis. JP and Bandai do know that it's a strong archetype. It's going to be a pretty popular archetype. It's probably the most powerful Purple has been in a while. Um, I think we're going to see a good amount of Anubis in top. Definitely at least one. I think that there are also some old favorites that remain really consistent. I think we're going to see Bloomlord in the top, especially with its BT14 support. and it can also just main deck a lot of silver bullets for like other popular decks. Like it has good cards to hate on Anubis that it doesn't have to force into its build. It just naturally runs normally anyway. So I think Bloomlord's relatively strong. I think Mirage is still just very fast and probably the archetypical go tall one stack win game deck. It's kind of like replaced from last year's Nationals the Grandis OTK, I guess, in that sort of realm of space. But I do think we're going to see security control too. I think security control in North America remains somewhat consistent and popular. The only downside is with the other regions nationals like Latin America and Europe and Oceania. There have been a lot of red hybrid topping, and just the threat of that being around makes security control less appealing for sure because it's almost an auto lose matchup.
I mean, I've played red hybrids, and I'm very well adversed with the deck in that matchup. It really does suck for them, just because red hybrids, being like a hybrid style deck, just does have a lot of ways to dance around what security control can do. And I think for that similar style of reason, we're also probably likely to see some Shine, just because Shine's not getting any weaker. And
Yeah.
Shine just has some really good outs to it. I think maybe some people will shift a little bit heavier into Control Shine just to try to deal with the board. And Control Shine definitely can deal with a Merva Anubis board.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, of the new archetypes, like Anubis is really the only new archetype that I expect to see in top. Deva, it would have to be a really good pilot to make it to like top 32 with the Deva deck. The new Garuru line might give just a purple base Garuru X build could probably do pretty well, but I think Mirage overall does better at what that deck wants to do. It has more support and more consistent like just the way to get there. But with the new Guru support is also Beelstar, which I know you know that I really like. The
yeah,
Guru
just
support really feeds that Beelstar engine really well. Um,
there's a lot
so,
of decks that can feed off of the Gurumon engine, because in Japan there was like some experimental play with like Gurumon engine into All Force, and maybe that's gonna take people by surprise. And it's not like All Force got worse either. Um, if anything, the training boosts just help All Force, and cycling, just the sheer cycling power just allows you to find the pieces that you need and pitch what you don't, to be able to make that deck more consistent. So
mhm,
maybe
yeah,
that can do something. I don't think a lot of North American people are like super high on that, but it is something that I did see in Japan a couple of times.
yeah. And I mean, even like you said, Shine Greymon with the training boosts, being able having access to both red and yellow training boosts, and still being able to grab all of your important pieces with either one is huge. Just big consistency boost. War Greymon toolbox decks, either the Black War Greymon kind of mid-rangey board control version, or the like BT12 War Greymon kind of OTK with the new Secret Greymon from BT14. They're both good options. Like there's honestly, this is probably the most varied a Nationals metagame has been, and not just like, oh, you have your best couple decks and then the decks that beat those, but we have like a really good gamut of diverse decks that can all do well into the open meta.
Yeah, most of the time EX sets don't try to inject insane like power spikes into the game. Usually there's like one deck that actually makes it out, a couple of cards add in some updates and supports to some current existing decks. And then there's always like just the for fun decks that are still like decent but just shy of being like meta competitive. And I think like that kind of nature still rings true in this. I don't know exactly how warping Anubis is going to be on the format, because I've looked at like meta spreads for a very long time. BT 14s, I honestly can say, was one of the widest meta spreads in Digimon history. by a long shot. Well, maybe not a long shot, but it was definitely a very healthy format. I think there was like 25 different decks that were able to top 16, and the number one deck wasn't overly represented. I think it was only like 16% versus last year with Black War Greymon before restrictions. That was at least 35, almost 40%, which is usually what happens when like the number one deck dominates and then just restricts everything else that's even viable. And I think like the game has reached at a certain power threshold where just a lot is pretty much viable.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that Digimon probably towards BT12 onward has kind of hit that point where you're not just seeing the best version of each color. You're starting to see archetypes take more of the wheel rather than just like the best cards in any given color are whatever the newest archetype is. Because now, I mean, you could go back and honestly, like, I mean, just with the new Garurumon engine coming out and Beelstar being viable again until the hits come, is like, that's a, what, BT6 deck that gets love.
Yes, BT6. That
So,
man,
like,
that was a long time ago.
yeah. And then even like Shine, like sure it gets support every couple of sets, but a lot of these archetypes are just old archetypes that get little bits of support here and there, and then they hit a point where the support's enough to carry it. Anubis, being a newer archetype, but really it's a facilitator for the Merva archetype because it's just digicrossing into Merva super cheap, and then using your retaliation boys to rush and block to just control the board in a very aggressive way.
And the funny thing is, both of them are shamans. So you also have like the subtle shaman synergies that the new Labramon also provides the deck. So you have like a better toolbox or like better cards in your toolbox to be able to use and customize the deck. And I think that's like the really cool part. And I know we kind of like skipped over Lugamon, but theoretically, you do have a couple of new dark animals that you could play around with. They're not the greatest, but they're not like awful. So like I think Dober X is actually a pretty solid card. I saw in some Japanese lists people tech it in just because of the like when digivolving draw and discard, just being able to cycle, set yourself up, swing with it, try to get into the trash in the early stages of the game. It really can help facilitate and be able to make or break the deck's overall speed and consistency.
Yeah, I mean, Lugimon could definitely benefit from some of the new things. The thing in my head though is, like if I want to play a deck that plays like Lugimon, I'm just playing Anubis because their goal is essentially the same, and Anubis does it way more efficiently than Lugimon does. At least in my opinion, it has like less outs, and just does it a bit better.
Yeah, like I think that's where like a lot of the not necessarily lesser decks because I do think like Lugamon still is a top contender. I just think that it's not necessarily as favored because you have decks like you said are doing the exact same thing. So against people who are trying to counter these go wide decks, they also just so happen to counter Lugamon in of itself, and I think like he's just a casualty to what Anubis does.
Yeah, the biggest thing I think is the Saber Dramon promo being really synergistic with the Merva Anubis engine, but not you can't really run it in Luga.
Yeah, that card's kind of ridiculous. Raid and Retaliation, just to be able to like kill like their biggest thing, especially if it doesn't have protection, and then on the inheritable, just on delete, bring something back. It's super good. I don't know how expensive the promos or even some of these cards are going to be at launch because I know we only have like what a week to be able to get the cards and make the mad
Mhm.
dash to finish our decks because I don't remember when we're supposed to upload our builds, but I know it's the time
And
is running out.
and I mean it is a box topper pack that you get one of is it six or seven variants from that one, the
6.
update pack? Six.
Yeah.
So I mean, on average, like just by those numbers, you're only getting two in a case.
Yeah, it's That card's
So
gonna
I
be
mean,
real
it's gonna
expensive.
be probably like a $20 card, I'd say, especially on release. Like for people trying to get the deck, you're gonna see people selling that for, I would say minimum 15, upper end 30.
E- I would probably agree with that sentiment because like even the lesser cards that are like from BT14, they're still the majority of them are above $10, and these are of
Mhm.
cards that aren't really seeing a whole lot of play, if any play at all. And now
Yeah,
you have a like playable one. So it's funny because
not
like
just playable, because Saber Dramon, I would say if you're running the Anubis deck, you need to run at least two. I
e-
would say 2 to 3 is a sweet spot. I don't know if I'd run four,
I probably
but
wouldn't run four.
running zero would be crazy. Like you need two. I feel like two's the number for sure.
Yeah, the card does a lot, and I think like another card people are sleeping on is like Raremon, just because he's another like purple facilitator engine card. I don't think Anubis is gonna play it, but I think like that's still just a pretty good card. Like Belfmon maybe could be able to make some work with Ukamon and Raremon being able to try to pick up some of the slack. Like there's when they have playable promos like this, it really kind of puts a sour taste in my mouth personally because it's just like it's a 1 of 6 chance, and all of the promos and singles are like half the box's actual value, and I think that's pretty
Yeah.
sad. But I mean, I think they knew going into EX5 that they needed to inject the value there rather than in the set itself because they probably were already talking. Um, about limiting Anubis and hitting a lot of the Gurumon cards.
Yeah, well both of the Digimon Nationals so far that have previously happened had an EX set drop right before Nationals, and the biggest draw for those EX sets getting hit on a limited list announced before Nationals. So it's like you gotta give people a reason to buy. Like the EX1 remains one of the lowest value over time sets ever because it came at a weird spot and then they hit a bunch of cards that like like hitting the ice wall in that set like murdered it. Like
Yeah.
in terms of value. I mean, it needed to happen, but just in general, just the set's very low value. I know, like locally, one of our shops for Black Friday was getting rid of boxes at $20 a piece just to like clear their inventory.
Oh, I would 100% buy that at
Oh,
$20 a
it was
box.
worth it because of
The
the Lugomon deck made the analog spike. So if you
yes.
pulled like 4 analog use, you paid for the box.
Yeah. And based on like my box math, because I always try to like math out what I'm reasonably guaranteed and likely to see so that way I could reduce my risk as much as possible. And the fact that you see at least one analog guaranteed in a box, sometimes two, like, yeah. If you're lucky, you could even get three with an alt art hit. Um, but regardless, I think like EX 5 is gonna sell fine just because those promos are gonna be like really expensive, especially since the majority of them are actually playable, like more playable than BT14s, and there's two of them. Um, but yeah, so as far as like preparing for nationals. Obviously, we've been talking about a lot of decks, and I guess like the one thing I'm curious is how do you practice? Because what I do for practice might be different than what you do for practice.
For me, a lot of it, at least in the beginning, is once I know like the just the spread of decks that I might want to play, it's just getting reps in with those decks, not necessarily like against anything specifically, but just playing them enough that I kind of learn the little like micro decisions, the macro decisions, just going through the motions with the deck in general. And then I'll move on to matchup practicing with each deck once I'm more comfortable with the deck itself and like some of the more nuanced plays within it.
Okay. I do kind of something similar. I don't necessarily get reps in with random stuff. I kind of just go into the deep end and I'm like, all right, I need this practice. And then I'll kind of like off to the side take notes and be like, okay, so in this matchup, this is what I'm looking for specifically in order to put me into a better position. So, just as an example, it's on YouTube. I was practicing red hybrids against Devas. I mean, obviously, I already know how to play red hybrids, but just trying to understand what I'm supposed to do in that matchup. And after playing a couple of reps, I like actually got it. And I'm like, even though it's a really bad matchup for red hybrids, it's not unwinnable because now I know the secret because I got in those reps.
Exactly. Sometimes, even if it's a bad matchup, it's important to like play against it just to see, what little thing, like why the games you do win, why did you win? Is it just that the matchup bricked, or are there little things that you're doing that contribute to that, that advantage that you could squeak out?
Yeah. And that's kind of like every single event. I kind of like think in retrospect, it's just like, okay, what could I have done better to put me in a more advantageous position? Or like if I misplayed, I try to note the misplays and be like, okay, I could have done better there, which would have had me had a better result overall. So I always like doing that type of stuff personally. Sometimes it does sound like I am beating myself up a little bit, but that's because I need to be harsh on myself in order to actually learn. Because I do think, like, even though a lot of people kind of discredit the amount of RNG that's in Digimon, there's still a fair amount of, like, skill that still is involved in the game.
I mean, yeah, and a big part of that is like just playing to your outs, like playing into the RNG when you need to, like making calculated risks based on the RNG as you know it is part of the skill too. Like, knowing when maybe I take this hit because it'll put me ahead either by something in security, like how likely am I to see a security bomb that'll help me here, or if you're playing like a reverse toolbox deck with things that utilize the trash pile, like how likely is it that something I need will get hit in security, and then I have, like in Beelstar, a lot of times your trash is just a second hand.
I mean, literally, because you just grab whatever option is in there and you just use it.
And then like on the inverse of that is also true when you're playing against, decks like Lugamon or Red Hybrid. If they're not seeing the Tamer and Red Hybrid, how important is poking for that one little security while you're still setting up, because that could be the Tamer they need to really take off. Like you gotta kind of ask yourself the risk reward of both sides.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that sentiment. Risk analysis and mitigation is definitely a huge contributing like factor to certain players' successes. And I also think like just like even from like a deck building perspective, like the game rewards good deck builders and a good deck choice going into specific matchups.
Yeah, I think the game's always going to reward consistency at like a macro level more than a micro level, but those little nuances do add up. Like if you're making better, smaller decisions, eventually the it could help close the gap for sure.
Yeah, I almost think it's like a like jumping stairs almost, where it's just like, yeah, every now and then you're going to walk two steps instead of one, but if you walk enough one steps, that makes a two step.
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
that's
I
kind
could
of a
see that.
weird one, but
No, I mean I get it, and then it's also comes down to deck choice because certain decks reward the macro decisions more than the micro, and then certain decks reward the smaller decisions more than the big ones for sure. And it just comes down to like what your play style is and what you're comfortable with. I mean, I've been on record plenty over the course of the lifespan of the Digimon card game that I think it's always better to take a deck you're more familiar with than the deck that's necessarily the quote unquote right choice for the meta. I think it's going to benefit you more to be comfortable and know those little nuances of a deck better than to play what's maybe like the best choice objectively.
yeah. And speaking of that, I almost feel kind of sorry for the Galaxy Loop players because we just got like literally after last week's episode, we just got the confirmation that like, oh yeah, Galaxy Loop is not legal for nationals. The choice restriction is going to take in effect on January 19th, and I'm just like, oh, thank God, I don't have to worry about Galaxy Loop. And then I almost am like, oh, that kind of sucks for the people who are prepping that. And that was actually funny enough, making the Zubimon promo spike really hard was because there was actually a lot of attention on that. And I think that might not be the most like macro deck to play. But like you said, I think if you really understood that deck and knew a lot of the micros, you could do very well with that deck.
Yeah, but I mean, also at the same time, if you're practicing a deck that any card game, any game in general, if you're practicing a combo that is almost inherently unintended, you should be ready at any point for that to get addressed before you can utilize it. That used to be a thing. I played like Warhammer for a little bit, Warhammer 40,000, and like whenever a new rule set would come out, like for a different army, like people would try to break it right away, and then it's like, well, you got to expect them to fix the rules if something is like unintendedly too beneficial. Like,
Yeah, I definitely like the choice restriction. I know there's a good amount of like Vanguard people because Bushiroad is big on choice restrictions because of just the style of their games. And I think like the way they approached choice restrictions, they're not really going to be like hardcore doing it as a normal part of their ban and restrictions. I think it's literally just going to be to address these specific combos more than anything else. At least that's how I think they're going to approach it based on this one instance.
yeah, it's hard to keep track of. Like, you don't want to set a precedent to where that's how you always do it because when you're getting into a game, like from the eyes of a new player, it could be weird to be like, okay, here's the limited and restricted list. But also, if you're playing this card with this card, you can't run them together. Also, this one with this, you can't get into too many of those. But it does make sense for in this situation having just the one.
Yeah, and I think that's why they're going to like hold that more in reserve for the unintentional combos cuz I know other people have been like trying to come up with their own kooky and wackiness where it's just like, "Oh yeah, this is possible and this is possible." And I'm just like, "Yeah, but is it really that much of a problem though because of the setup?" I think like because Galaxy Loop was easier to set up than some of the other combos people are trying to come up with and discover. Like that's a huge contributing part is how playable is it? And
Mhm.
like I think that Grace Nova is a pretty solid deck. I don't think he's a national topping deck. He seems like the more for fun deck, and if I had to pick like any of the other new archetypes to see in tops, I don't even think I'm going to see a whole lot of Devas, just because if people are playing Anubis, then Devas are kind of just bad because Anubis farms them for basically free. Because of like what you said with Saber Dramon, it's just like, yeah, I swing with my Saber Dramon, raid into your dude. What are you gonna do? It's gonna die. And just Anubismon, like when you digivolve up or just use his main ability, then he just pops level fives and like now what? So it just becomes really hard, and I think because of that, we're gonna see less Devas. On top of like both of them are secret rares in the set, like they're big boss monsters. And if we only have a week to get the cards, how much are you really gonna be like throwing to build like a deck using like four secret rares in terms of
Yeah,
like a
that
brand new deck?
that's always the problem with decks that require multiples of a secret rare. Upon release, it can be very limiting to get them just because of distribution throughout a regular box. I'd say most players probably buy two to four boxes of a new set. Realistically, closer to two for most players, and then they get singles. Maybe if you're like a more devoted player like me, I buy six of every set, no matter what. I found that that's like the number for me to get. But but my goals are also to try and get a play set of everything as soon as possible for like both testing and deck building. So I'm just a freak like that.
Yeah, that's why I used to do cases of every set, and then the money just caught up, and I'm just like, oh, I can't do this anymore. I used to sell a lot of my extra stuff, and then Digimon stopped being like hardcore profitable. If I could, it's still profitable if I literally sell everything, but then I don't get anything. And as a player, I want to play stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't really justify doing cases, but I usually do the half case, do six. Find a buddy to split a case with, get it at a good price. Uh Me personally, I don't really go shopping a lot. I just support my locals. So that's I am a big advocate for that. Even if you have to pay a little extra, support your locals. They give you a place to play. They help build the community. So just a little plug there.
That's kind of my situation right now. I've been bouncing around between a whole bunch of online retailers, and I'm just like, I'm really tired of just like the shipping and everything and just the waiting. And even though it is like a little bit more expensive, like you said, sometimes, like you build that relationship with them and they get to know you, and sometimes they can help you a little bit more in certain situations. I've gotten products like maybe a day or two early just because I asked and they knew me because I bought so many stuff from them.
Yeah, for sure. I have a pretty good relationship with our locals, and
Yeah.
it does come in handy. I mean, you know, just because at the end of the day, if you're a regular customer, even if like our locals, we have a group of like 4 or 5 really devoted players, and it's just even if a set's really hype and people come from out of play, like you know what I mean, they just take care of their own first. So
Yeah.
it's like of their allocation, they'll make sure that the people that need to eat get fed before they sell to people they don't know.
Yeah. And I think a lot of locals, like the good ones, are like that. And I'm probably going to be buying two booster boxes at the start myself, just because I want to like kind of gauge how much my locals is going to sell. And then I'm playing a deck, or I'm like thinking about playing decks that don't really need any of the new cards. So I'm a huge Melga stand, and I'm just like I'm gonna have to sit Melga out for this one just because like it's not that I'm not confident in my build. It's kind of like what you were saying. If I'm gonna play Melga, there's already similar decks that don't need the new cards that I could play instead. And that's why I was like leaning towards a couple of different decks. So one of the decks that I'm thinking about playing obviously is Red Hybrids. Just very consistent, very strong red deck, and it has one of the best floodgates that, like you also said with Bloom, it could just run naturally because it is just in red, and that's Crimson Blaze. Because there is a lot of go wide decks, and Crimson Blaze kind of hoses on them on top of like decks that just play Digimon by card effects. So it's just a solid anti-meta card that I could run at no deck restriction to what I'm playing with. Then some of the other decks that I was thinking about was like Lugamon, just because Lugamon is I like that deck. I think it's it's the OTK deck that I kind of enjoy because it could do more than just OTK, and that's what I kind of look for. Is I don't want just like the most brain dead OTK deck I could play. I want something where I do have subtle nuances that really can separate me from other players, and Lugamon from other decks inversely. And then the third deck that I was thinking about was Bloomlord, just because out of all of the stack deck base decks in the game, Bloomlord is easily by far one of the most, if not the most consistent one. And then, like you said, there's just a lot of natural in-engine stuff that it could run to help itself against other matchups against the meta spread. So I'm curious what decks you're thinking about bringing because you always got to be prepared with more decks than just one. At least that's what I found to be the case because last year my old co-host he brought one deck and it wasn't even complete and he had to play nationals with a incomplete deck list compared to what he
Yikes.
wanted. So like that's why I'm always like I need 3 decks to be prepared as much as I humanly possibly can just in case something goes wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, uh, Bloomlord's up there for me. I've been playing Bloomlord pretty much since release. I'm comfortable with the deck. I think it has a lot of good support, a lot of good answers to popular decks in the meta. And it doesn't really get shut down by too much, especially memory floodgates have like lost popularity because a lot of the decks that gain memory have really cheap and accessible answers just consequentially to like rookie floodgates. Um, so really, Bloomlord doesn't get shut down by too much. Um, so I think that's a really strong pick. I think me personally, just because I don't really play a lot of blue, but I think Mirage is super strong. If I were to play like a go big OTK archetype, it might be the Mirage. I do really like purple decks. I mean, I'm sure anyone who is familiar with me knows from my local like gameplay videos. I've been playing a lot of Beelstar, and that's I mean, unless something changes drastically, that's what I'm taking to Nats. I think most people who know me would know that. I just love Beelstar. I wanted to play it last year at Nats, but I went with Crossheart, which is like my other favorite deck type. Uh, I mean, honestly, Crossheart would make the short list, but so many people are going to be playing Psychmons just based on Anubis's presence that I just can't. There's no way I could play Crossheart and not expect to just get uh, inadvertently shut down by Anubis hate. Uh, so I mean, I think my big three, the three decks that I'm going to have on me, bring the Nats for sure, are going to be Bloomlord, Beelstar, and for me, probably Shine. I'll probably have Shine there. I don't really play a lot of Shine, but I'll have it. Why not? I think it's really powerful into the meta. I think people kind of forgotten about what a powerhouse it is. And it's very consistent in terms of just you always do the same thing, and if they don't stop you, you're gonna win.
Yeah, I think those are all three very good decks to bring to nationals. Um, because like we said at the earlier, there is just a lot of like different decks that are all still relatively viable. Again, we don't know exactly how Anubis is going to warp the format, if he is going to be basically the Black War Greymon approach, but I think because everything else is still kind of just slightly below him in terms of power, and then everything is like kind of at that level, maybe he won't have that big of a presence, and uh, maybe something else will be able to win nationals. I know the other nationals for a lot of the other different regions, they weren't EX5 format, but yeah, it was just interesting seeing how everything from BT14 was developing. And with EX sets, usually the only like real concrete data that we have is to go with the last formats, which last format, now that it's over, we can actually take a look at the full spread, see what was actually good, and kind of just go from there and kind of theorize where the new decks kind of fall in line based on what we can kind of tell that they're trying to do and where the meta is currently at.
Yeah, I mean, man, I'm just looking through like decks that did well in Japan around this format, and it is still very varied.
Yeah, I think BT14 definitely was a really good set. I think like I've said this before and I'll say it again. BT14 was like the big update set to where BT13 Shine was not necessarily that dominant, but he was still the best deck by a decent margin. And I think like BT14 just tried to catch everything up to where Shine was. I still kind of having some very iffy thoughts on the training cards. I see they're good, I see they're bad, and I've been watching BT14's secondary market like a hound because I want to pick up certain things, and like even right now that set's still holding some pretty decent value because of the promos, and the singles in there are actually just really good. Patamon's borderline broken. We didn't even talk about yellow vaccines at all because Metamamon is another like yellow vaccine Digimon. It's playing more into Kentaros where like wants to damage itself and aggress at the same time, but like yellow hasn't really been aggressive. So maybe somebody will come up with a really decent yellow vaccine list. Is Anubis actually a virus though? That's the one thing I don't know off the top of my head.
Um, I can check that real quick. But I mean, honestly, if we're talking about stuff that we haven't brought up, that we'll probably see yellow vaccine for sure. I
Anubis
also
is a
think,
vaccine.
yeah, Anubis isn't a virus. I knew he was vaccine or data, but it didn't make
Merva's a
sense.
virus though.
Yes,
Stick stick
Merva
that
is.
stick that Merva into security using Angemon. Heck yeah.
But realistically, that could also be the equalizer. If you're a fan of security control and you're worried about red hybrid, if you run the Mitamamon as your top end, I don't know if red hybrid can deal with it.
Um, they would have to Emperor it. That's like their only actual out is to just Emperor.
Yeah. So if you, I mean, just hypothetically, I mean, it's a lot of things to put in place, but if you have Venusmon and Metamon out, you're just safe.
Yeah, you're safe for a turn, and it would force a deck like Red Hybrids to basically just sit and hold. Um,
Yeah.
which because of
But
Mitamamon being a little bit more aggressive, maybe that's all it takes. I don't know.
yeah, and I mean other things that like I just thought of. Like, I'm changing my third deck actually because I'm not super familiar with Shine, but I just thought about this. Hunters can run Crimson Blaze really easily, and I feel like Hunters is probably just one of the most consistent archetypes in Digimon.
Yeah, it doesn't get hosed too hard by Psychmon because you're only realistically crossing on your level threes, at worst your fours. And it's not
Hmm.
like the cost difference is that much. It's noticeable and it's helpful, but it's not like, oh, I am playing my level four for nine. Like, that feels a little bit bad versus my level four for like five or four.
Yeah, I think Hunters. If you're playing Hunters and you're comfortable with it, I think you can make very minor tweaks to that and probably perform really well at the national level. If you're a good player and you know your way around that deck, you could just throw in a couple Crimson Blazes and just go to town.
Does Anubis run any tamers out of curiosity? Because I know like shoving Digimon under the tamers like actually is like really
It doesn't
important.
it it doesn't run Tamers, but if they don't win on the Anubis turn, tucking the Merva under anything else to like remove blocker from all of the Digimon and then just swinging out for game would probably just get you there.
Okay, okay. Yeah, that's very valid because they are gonna have bodies on the field at worst.
Yeah.
So yeah, Hunters I think like a lot of older decks, some people just actually kind of sleep on, and that's the fun part about Digimon. Like as a whole, when we get into this type of a format, it's like, oh, there's still like just a whole bunch of like room for experimentation and exploration, and just some of the older decks figuring out ways to be able to give them the answers that they need. And I think that's what's really fun.
Have you played with or against that Floodgate Rush deck that got kind of popularized?
I did. It's funny, but I think like there's a decent amount of decks that just shut it down.
Yeah.
Like it's good. Ukamon is like an absolutely correct card, but
I
uh
also think Ukamon is what makes Red Hybrid just be able to keep up with the new meta. Like having like two or three Ukamon in the Red Hybrid deck really speed it up.
yes. As a person who's been playing on it, like I have dropped Boko just because I want to use my raising area more efficiently because Boko I'm always going to have to hard play no matter what, and it's doing the same searching, just searching a little bit deeper than the BT4 Flamon, and it's a because there's so much removal, especially low level removal. It's basically just a free like thing for somebody to delete or take advantage of, and I just have been liking it less and less versus Ukamon, where it comes out, it gives me that extra memory. So if I am being memory choked to one, now I'm at two, and now I can start making my hybrid plays.
Yeah. Man, the meta is really wide. I think people just like if you're listening to this and you're like, man, I need to know the answer for what to play, play the deck that you're going to enjoy playing. Play the deck that you know the best. You're going to have. I've always said, play what you like playing because whether you win or lose, at least you're not. There's nothing worse than trying to metagame an event, bringing a deck that you don't really have fun playing, but you think is like the best deck, and then losing. And then you're like, man, not only am I losing, but I'm playing this deck that I don't even like, didn't even want to play.
That was kind of me last year. I was fine playing Black War Greymon, but I really just enjoyed Hunters more, or not Hunters, Cross Hearts more. I have a secret soft spot for Cross Hearts and for Hunters, more so Cross Hearts, not because of the show or anything, because Hunters was a way better season in the anime. Um, but just what that deck can do just is still very fun to me. And I think I might have been able to do better, even though I knew I was going to be going up against a whole bunch of Black Wars. Um, did I have 7 Superior at that time? No, I didn't. Or wait, did we?
No.
No.
Yes, at last year's Nats, we had X7, not superior, just X7.
Okay, that was the big deciding difference was if we had Superior, I 100% would have played Cross because I would have been like, okay, I at least kind of have this like awkward answer to Black War. It's not the greatest answer, but it's at least a answer. So that makes sense why I didn't bring it. And I'm still comfortable on the Greymon decks. They're not hard to play. It was just more of like understanding how to play mostly against the mirror and into Grandis. So I was doing a lot of last minute practicing, which if you're actually at Nats, make sure to actually get some sleep and don't over practice because then you could burn yourself out and that's not going to be good.
Yeah. Also, keep little snacks with you. Bring some protein bars. It's super important to like be at the best headspace you could be at. These are long days. Just like take care of yourselves. Drink a lot of water. Eat some snacks. Just you know, be ready to be the best you for the day.
Let's just hope the weather is going to be better than last year's.
I mean, I'm from Florida, so I didn't mind the weather. That was still better than most of our weather most of the year.
It was raining all weekend.
Yeah, I don't know. At the time of this recording, my town just had worse floods than when we had a hurricane just from it raining all day yesterday. So
I mean, we're just coming off of a snowstorm over where I live.
it's probably the same storm. Just it just hits us different.
Right. Because everything's like frozen over. I've been hearing on the radio flights have been getting delayed, and I'm just sitting here and I'm like, oh, I hope my flight doesn't get delayed. It sucks that like my flight already decided to be like, yeah, so we're just gonna like for a month straight constantly just change your flight, and I'm just like, that's whatever. It'll settle down eventually. I know I'm getting to Los Angeles, so it'll be fun. When are you flying in?
I will be arriving Friday morning at
Okay.
some point, or like I think sometime around noon. And yeah, I'm gonna be ready to go. I'm
I
getting there. I think like an hour after Dan does. We're all gonna meet at the hotel and get situated.
yeah, I am coming in Thursday. Yeah, Thursday. So I'll just be one day ahead.
It's
But
gonna be a good time.
it is. And it's gonna be exciting to see everyone. I know I don't go to a lot of in-person events. I wish I could go to more, but life circumstances say I can't all the time. So I'm super excited to see everyone, especially since they opened up this event. Did you have your invite before they announced the change to make it open?
I did. I got my invite. I think like the third regionals.
I don't remember how many regionals it took me. I know I got mine before they announced that it
Or
was going to
no,
be open.
actually, I'm sorry. This year I got my invite at Gen Con.
Oh, you got it at so basically right when they made that announcement then.
Right before they made that announcement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, because I played in both regionals, and day one I had come uh, 18th
Oh, and then
for the
passed
first
out.
regional. but they weren't sure how many pass downs there were because there was like conflicting information, and one of the people that needed to verify whether or not that he got it at like a previous regionals had left.
Uh,
So I was like very unsure whether or not I even got an invite on day one. So I had to play again day two, and I came I think 10th or 12th day two. I don't know. There's a video on my channel about both events, both deck lists. I played Hunters followed by Royal Knights. I definitely got the invite with Royal Knights, but I might have gotten it with Hunters too.
yeah, I don't know how Royal Knights does in this meta, to be honest. Like as just another weight out their deck.
Psychmon being mained against Anubis makes it like almost unplayable, unfortunately.
Really?
Yeah, it's just because I mean, even if you're playing against a new like any deck with purple is gonna main deck at least two Psychmon, even if it hurts them, because you have the ability to get rid of it yourself, and just the meta being a lot of purple, like I just feel like you inadvertently take that bullet too hard, because a Psychmon kind of stalls out like Anubis and Beelstar to an extent, but they have like answers around it. But Royal Knights, you need to draw. It's a deck that doesn't filter through its cards very quickly. So if you don't open with the answer, it's a good chance you're not going to see it.
That yeah, that makes sense. I could see that. Cuz I know like last format BT13 like that was like one of the darling decks. Obviously, it was a premier deck considering it had both secret rares in it. Um, but it had a pretty decent presence, and it's interesting thinking that like just the slight meta change is gonna make it go away.
Yeah, but I mean, like we said, can always come back. I mean, I also, for what it's worth, I don't think D Reaper would be the worst pick. Now that War Greymon has taken a hit in popularity, I mean, I guess the Saber Dramon would really mess you up, but overall, D Reaper is always relatively okay. I feel like D Reaper is always like tier decent.
It's definitely like one of the most rogue decks ever because it is a countdown deck. It's a clock deck where you are basically just always fighting against the clock before it just comes out and just kills you.
Yeah, and whenever purple's very popular, it does a little bit better because a lot of purple's removal is level based, so it just can't touch most of Reaper.
Yeah, so you literally just set up a gatekeeper and then just call it GG.
Yeah, like Anubis wouldn't be able to pop anything.
It'll always draw you a card though. Still
Yeah,
does
yeah,
something.
that's the upside.
So yeah, I definitely am super excited for nationals. Maybe we can meet up and do something in person.
Yeah, I don't know how packed my itinerary is, but I mean, I want to say hi to everyone. I want to do fun stuff. I know that I'm staying with other GFG members. It's gonna be me, Dan, and Nobu, and I think Max is staying with us as well. So
Is
we got
Max
a fun
playing
hotel
One
room.
Piece?
I think Max is playing One Piece main event and Digi side events.
Okay, okay.
No, Nobu's playing One Piece, and then me and Dan will be playing Digimon. But I think Nobu's also going to be playing in Digi side events if he's not tied up in the main event at One Piece.
Yeah, I know because anyone who's unfamiliar, this year Bandai is changing it up and they're basically doing like all of their card games except for Dragon Ball Super, which that's kind of hilarious to me, but it also sad at the same time. They only have so much space for so many card games, and they are about to adopt another technically 1.5 card games because you have Fusion World for Dragon Ball Super coming out like what February, and then later this year you also have Union Arena. So it's just like, man, Bandai just has like 5 card games. That's a lot. And the fact that what 3 or 4 of them is going to be represented at this event is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and it's going to be such a good time. Like I think a lot of people were like bummed that it was in LA again, but I think now that it's going to be utilizing more of the convention center than just the one convention room, it'll be like more of the huge convention center, and I think I'm ready to be blown away by what Bandai has in store for like just in terms of an event. It's gonna feel like a convention rather than just a like last year. It ran great. It ran smooth. Everything was fun. Everything was timely. But it very much felt like one tournament with very minimal things for spectators and goer buys to like do. Whereas I think this year it's going to feel almost bad to be in the main event because there's going to be so much to do.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about it, it's just like even though I don't main One Piece, I do have a One Piece deck. So like, if I just want to take a Digi break, and go play some One Piece, like I'm actually able to do that. And if I want to just peruse and see what Battle Spirits is up to, sure, I can do that also. Like, I think Bandai is trying to make it more of a spectacle because they're running more games. I don't know how stretched thin they're going to be at the end of the day because that's still a lot of staff and a lot of uh, people just in general. But I do think that they're going to be trying to use the space better than last year because like last year was fun, but it was kind of awkward where we were just in these two rooms and one of the rooms was literally just for merch and an art gallery. I don't think they're going to bring that back, but
Oh,
it'll
I hope they do. The art gallery was sick.
I kind of
I
hope they do
just
too, just with new art because like we don't see a lot of like the full art very often. And I know somebody was like going around getting high quality pics and scans of them. So
mhm.
that was definitely cool seeing like hey, we actually have a way to see these cards in full art because Digimon's art is like insane compared to a lot of other card games.
I think one of the most insane things was that Kenji Watanabe was there giving signatures for free.
Yeah, I know they're going to be giving us as like some additional thing the Liberator pack, I think is what it's called, where it's just like, oh yeah, people who attend also get a Liberator pack, which is like a sneak peek of some of the new cards to come. Um I personally would like more promos, but I don't know how these cards are going to be like how these cards are going to be distributed later. I think they might be demo deck cards or starter deck cards. I have no idea. Nobody knows except for Bandai. That'll be fun.
We'll find out soon. Whatever it is, I can be confident that Dan Vang voted for it.
Yeah. Um. So I wonder is Dan gonna be daring enough to bring Imperial?
I cannot discuss that.
Because I found some secret spice for Imperial, and it doesn't work always the best, but it's so spicy and delicious. It's so good when it fires off. Just because Togemon is like absolutely one of the most broken cards ever.
Yeah, Togemon's pretty silly.
Yeah, because I was like anyone who watched my deck profile, I was all up in the Wormmon hype train because I saw like oh like after a lot of playtesting, I learned that end of turn DNA matters a lot more than I gave it credit for, just because I'm not the most memory efficient at times. So being able to still make my plays definitely had a huge impact. And the Wormmons are the best ones to do that while digging out. And then you could use like Togemon to play the Ken, to play a Wormmon, to Digivolve to end of turn DNA, and I was just like, this is this is it. This is the sauce. So it'll be fun seeing you all and seeing what you bring at the end of the day and how well you
Yeah,
place. How well
I
did
can
you
tell
do
you one
last?
thing.
Yeah.
Well, last year I lost after losing two. So I went 2-0 in the first two rounds, and I lost two back to back. Um, one of which on stream against Wong Zero against Alex, where I tunnel visioned pretty gnarly, and then watching that back just hurts me. But it was chill. He deserved the win. And then I played Force, which wasn't even a real deck yet, and it was like my hard counter for Crossheart. And I decided instead of getting tilted, I was going to just go play some side events. And I won an Evo Cup Koromon, an Evo Cup Greymon in like two of the side events, and then a bunch of participation stuff. I just like swept every side event I entered, so I had a good time.
Heck yeah. I sweated
I,
it out and I managed to get like 300 on the dot. So I was just like, top third out of the best 1,000. Now my challenge is, can I do better? So that's gonna be a little bit easier said than done. But
Yeah, I think my goal is the same. If I don't do well in the main event, I want to at least try and do well in the side event. And this year, there's going to be a lot of really. I mean, they're going to do the 3v3 side events, which are super cool, have really exclusive, really fun prizing. They're going to have probably, if I had to guess, they'll have more of like last year. They had the Evo Cup, the old Evo Cup prizing for side events, which is
okay.
insane. Like if they do that again with either the old Evo Cup prizing or even old Ultimate Cup prizing, it's super cool. I'm just excited to see what they do. My highlight of last year was I won the Evo Cup Greymon and I was able to go get it signed by the artist. So I was able to wait in line and get Kenji Watanabe to sign like the $400 Greymon or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I'm stoked on that I have that.
Yeah. I think it's because it's open this year, so I think they're definitely going to have more side events than last year because last year they didn't really seem like it seemed like Core ran a fine ship for what the event was. No shade on them or anything. Um, I I know PPG is running this event, so it'll be interesting to see like how these different events are being ran and if everything goes smoothly, how much side events are going to be ran, what kind of prizing. It's going to be absolutely wild. It's just a shame that the main like the day of Swiss isn't going to be streamed, but at least we convinced them to stream the day 2, the top cut streams. So that's at least something. I know they're going to like video it out and show it eventually their Swiss event, but I get it. Digimon is definitely going to be a really interesting um, game to see how it develops this year. And Nationals is going to bring the year of 2023 to a close. At least in the way I look at it, I look at like the years as from Nationals to Nationals.
Yeah,
So
at least for the card game for sure.
yeah, I didn't realize until later on that like you could win a trip to Japan for getting first or second. So like I want to say that's my goal, but that's just such a lofty goal. Um,
No, I'll say it. I'm going to Japan. Let's go, guys. I'm just gonna take it all. I'm just gonna win this year. No big deal. I just decided that now.
right. Um, I'm just like if I can't get first, second will be good enough for me.
Yeah, I mean, someone's got to win. Why not me, right?
I
Why not you? Just do it.
yeah. No, I think it's entirely possible with how diverse the meta is. Anything can. It almost feels like anything can happen, and that's like always exciting to me.
Anything can happen, and I guarantee you something will happen. So that's the good news.
Yeah. So, on that note, I guess this is a good place to wrap things up. So, I want to thank everyone for listening, and I want to thank Tyler for coming out and joining me on this episode. Getting some of his insight is definitely invaluable. He's such a cool dude. And if you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please make sure to share it with others and post it on social media just to help the algorithm spread it around a little bit more. And thanks again for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye.